As I was working on this series, Catching the Codfather, I would end my days with two somewhat conflicting feelings. One, that I want to eat fish for dinner. Two, that I'm not sure if I should be eating fish for dinner, or at the very least, not sure what kind of fish I should be eating, where I should get it, what I need to know about it. So all along, I wanted to do a bonus episode looking squarely at the food piece of the story. A diner's guide, if you will. And I knew exactly who I wanted to do it with. So I feel like I have to tell you, when I was growing up, if my family went out to eat, and it was a special occasion, we went to one of your restaurants, to the point that I believe we did Thanksgiving dinner at one of your restaurants one year.
Did they have turkey? Because we did put it on the menu.
Really, just for that occasion?
Yes.
I think we had seafood because I was asking my family about this, if anybody remembered that night. And one of my aunts said she got lobster and she asked for drawn butter. Mm-hmm. And the waiter came back with a picture of a drawing of a stick of butter.
That's funny.
Roger Berkowitz is a legend in New England seafood. He grew up working in his father's fish market called Legal Seafoods, and then he built that business into an empire with dozens of restaurants all over the East Coast. When Julia Child needed fresh fish for an episode of The French Chef, she came to Roger. When Ronald Reagan wanted a dish from every state at his inauguration dinner, he served Roger's clam chowder. Truly a legend. Roger Berkowitz has a new business delivering frozen seafood direct to consumers. And as you may have noticed, he is also sponsoring this season of the podcast. We are, of course, grateful to Roger for that support. But I also want you to know that Roger did not have any hand in the series itself, and that this was a conversation I wanted to have long before he decided to sponsor the show. It was worth the wait, and I really think you'll enjoy it too. Could you tell me how you started out? Take me back to your family's fish business.
How do we start out? Well, probably about 10 years old. And people said, oh, that's slave labor or whatever. Well, my father worked long hours, and if we were going to see him, we really had to see him at the fish market. And how many 10 or 11-year-old kids, get to wait on people? Not we had to stand up on a milk crate in order to do it. And then we learned how to fry and batter fish. And so we learned about fish really from the ground up, and we got an opportunity to see our father at the same time.
Did you get to know Julia Child when you started out there?
Absolutely. I got to meet Julia, I think I was 15 or 16 years old. And she would come in. She lived up the street. She lived on Irving Street in Cambridge. And it's funny, one of the things, you've heard of monkfish, of course, right?
Yes.
All right, so I got to tell you a quick monkfish story.
And let me tell, before you tell the monkfish story, let me tell you, I've, after working on this series, I kind of got interested in the so-called underutilized species, or, the species of fish out there that, we don't think of right away, like the cod and the flounder and the haddock. And what are those species I should, get out there and try? Mm. And monkfish was one of the ones that I started trying to cook without knowing, and then looked into it and realized that you had this whole story that is probably the reason I can buy monkfish at my local supermarket to begin with. So yeah, tell that story.
So I kind of stumbled over it by mistake. I was down the fish pier buying fish for the fish case. And I was walking past one of the stalls, and I see a box, a wooden crate with a grease pen marked monkey tails. I go, monkey tails? That doesn't sound appetizing. So I asked one of the dock guys, I go, what's this? And he said, you can bleep this out. He goes, you don't want any of this shit, but we send it to France for big money. Mm. I go, really? I go, give me 10 pounds.
And did they have the whole fish there, or was just the tail?
Okay, so this is where the story gets into. It was just the tail. And I put it in the case, and as luck would have it, Julia was by that day. So I said, Julia, do you know what this is? She looks at it and she goes, lot, which is French for monkfish. And so she took it home, and then she called and she said, can you get me a whole one? Well, I didn't know what a whole one looked like. I said, sure, I'm sure it won't be a problem. So I call up the fisherman. I said, I need a whole monkfish. It took me 2 weeks because a monkfish looks like a prehistoric creature that's 70% head, teeth, and cartilage, and you cut it off and just use the tail section. Long story short, we finally got it in.
Woo! Look at that. This is a monkfish or anglerfish. And look at that great big mouth. Look at those teeth. They're teeth.
It's sometimes called goosefish.
Yes.
Because if you've seen the inside of a goose's mouth, it's like teeth behind teeth behind teeth. It looks like the alien from the the horror sci-fi movie Alien. It's really a crazy looking creature.
And he's even got some teeth under the eyes, if you can believe that.
But you never see that at the grocery store.
You never see it. And, it's funny. I was on a friend's fishing boat once, and he knocked me away because I wasn't watching myself, and I almost stepped on a monkfish that was about to bite me.
What's interesting about it is that it looks so big. This weighs about 20 pounds, but all you eat is the tail.
She put it on her show. Time magazine did a photo shoot of it, and she put it in her book. But the power of Julia at that particular time is that when she said, this is what you should be eating, it just took off overnight. And so that's what the fish industry needed. It needed someone who could champion the non-traditional, underutilized, sometimes they call it trash fish, not trash fish, but it was really the underutilized. And so she would popularize them.
And so if you happen to run into a monkfish one day, don't scream. Invite him home for dinner. This is Julia Child. Bon appetit.
Yeah, it's weird. Monkfish doesn't have that really flaky quality that I think a lot of us prize, but it has this chewiness that I love, like in a chowder dense, or something. The density of it.
It doesn't break down.
It doesn't fall apart.
People use it as poor man's lobster. I mean, you can almost season it as such, but it's really good in fish stews. I mean, that's really where it holds up and really shines.
One of the things that struck me in just reading up on the way we eat seafood is that Americans are pretty unadventurous in our taste in seafood. I think the figure I found was 86% of all our seafood is accounted for by just 10 species, right? So it's shrimp, tuna, salmon, cod. Why do you think that is?
One word. Bones.
Bones.
Yes.
You can't get past the bones thing.
Well, so in many countries and cultures, they're used to picking around bones, and they're very adept at it. Yep. Not so much in the United States. You get a bone, it was a major issue.
Yep.
So you really needed products, and the species you just mentioned with swordfish, tuna fish, really didn't have bones. It was a large bone, but we're not going to get a bone stuck in your throat. And that really was how I believe Americans really thought about seafood. Now, if you came from an ethnic background, whether it was Indian, Asian, whatever, you were already adept at maneuvering around bones, but not so much if you were you grew up in America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah. I talked to the marine biologist who used to work with Julia to kind of help promote some of these other species, and she would say, in Europe, they'll eat mackerel and they'll eat the fish right off the bone. And she was talking with Julia, and she figured, people always ask you what your favorite meal is. What's your least favorite meal? What is it you don't want to eat? And Julia said, if I ever get chicken that's not on a bone, I send it back. It always tastes better. The protein always tastes better when it's on. You do a much better Julia Child impression than I do. The protein always tastes better on the bone, right? And that it is a bit of a mental block. Yeah,
and if it's certainly so one of the popular things, you don't see it all that often, is a swordfish chop. There's only two, it sort of comes off the shoulder of us, and there's only two, obviously, in a swordfish. But to that point, it is always much more succulent coming off a bone. And, the flavor profile is great. The fats and the oils are great off of that. Yeah. So, she was right.
Yeah. Something I've been thinking about in working on this series and this story is that I think we all consciously know that fish are wild animals, that we get this from the ocean, but I don't think we truly internalize the fact that this is our last wild, truly wild food, that these animals live in an ecosystem, that they're all mixed together out there, large and small. That this is not a factory farm. This is not a monoculture that we can just order up, however much salmon we want. We catch these things all together, and so we should probably eat them all together, or eat a bigger variety of them.
Yes.
Are there fish? You mentioned the monkfish story. Are there other species of fish that you've kind of championed or tried to raise awareness
It's
around?
kind of interesting now. I was just reading an article, and one of the things my father used to eat a lot of, and I remember through the years I've started, and I've got my grandkids eating them now.
Yep.
Sardines.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're so nutritious, and I just read an article where the next couple of generations are really focusing more on sardines, whereas most boomers, as an example, would not want to eat sardines, and it was their parents' food.
We had a Yankee swap among our team here at GBH, and I'm looking over here at one of my colleagues. She's smiling. And, you never know going into a Yankee swap what's going to be the thing that everybody fights over and what's going to be the dud, right?
Right.
And let me tell you, the tinned sardines where, we nearly came to blows. So we're on the same
Okay,
wavelength.
so that the other thing that I think is going to get popular, and for the right reasons, is seaweed. Or sea vegetables. I think it's better to call them sea vegetables. When we think of weed, it's not necessarily a positive, but there is a lot of kelp farming now taking place up in Maine. You see it more in salads and whatnot. And the Japanese are so sophisticated in terms of understanding and appreciating the minerality of what's coming out of the water. So I think as time goes on, we should be shifting more and more, towards that, because they do eat more of a rounded diet coming out of the ocean, not just a fillet of cod or haddock.
While we're on the topic of rebranding, maybe you could help us out with this. So, there's been all this agonizing over cod in New England, right? The iconic fish. And as you know, the stocks have been up and down. We tell this story in the series. One of the things I learned that I didn't really know going in is that one of the fish that has come in to fill that void in the ecosystem off New England is dogfish. And there's a lot of dogfish out there. But you don't see a lot of dogfish on menus.
No.
And I think the name might have something to do with it. So why don't we eat spiny dogfish?
It doesn't taste good?
Oh, you think it's okay. You think the name is not the problem?
No, I think yes. No, to your point, yes. I mean, the name is off-putting. There's no question. Shark in general is an acquired taste.
Yeah.
And you really almost have to purge it and soak it because the way it excretes waste through its flesh. It's
not appetizing.
It's not appetizing, and I don't think it tastes good. I mean, that's me personally. I'm sure others, will disagree, but yes, there is a lot, and you see more and more as the waters heat up a little bit more.
Yeah. So I want to turn now and run down kind of like a diner's guide glossary of terms.
Okay.
For the average person out
Sure.
buying fish in the supermarket and wondering what all this means. Fresh versus frozen. What should we know?
Yeah. So very, very interesting. So fresh is, when you think of fresh, you think of something that's never been frozen. You think of right off the boat. And then when it is frozen, oftentimes it's frozen mechanically, which means it takes several hours to freeze through, and in the process of freezing it through, it damages the cell structure.
When you say, frozen mechanically, you mean put in a freezer?
In a regular freezer,
Yeah.
where it takes a period of hours to freeze the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that process, the cell structure breaks down and the flesh absorbs all the moisture. So when you get a piece of fish that's been frozen mechanically and then thaw it out and go to cook it, it tastes watery. It's devoid of flavor. So traditionally, a fish that has been mechanically frozen is not good. You should really want last 1 or 2 days catch. Now, here's the thing. A fishing boat goes out for 5 days and starts catching fish from day one.
Right.
Well, if you're in the fish business, as we were and are, you want the last 1 or 2 days catch, because that's impeccably fresh. But, you've got to know exactly who you're dealing from, because, sometimes down at the auction, someone will say, oh, you know what, I want 1,000 pounds of XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
and you're getting a mixture of what that fish is. And then that fish could theoretically sit in someone's warehouse or wholesale operation for 2 or 3 days. And by the time it gets to you, whether it's in a fish market or a restaurant, you add all of that up, and it can be 5, 6, 7 days. So
Since that fish was caught.
Yeah. And so one of the things that has really intrigued me over time is just take one of the last 2 days catch. Let's say gray sole has come in. You don't know when the next gray sole boat is coming in. Mm-hmm. So taking it and putting that under nitrogen, this is really a Japanese technique. And if you've ever been to the Siki market in Tokyo, you'll see how they handle it. But if you get something that's impeccably fresh and put it under nitrogen, which freezes the flesh in a matter of minutes, not hours, plus it also actually kills a lot of the bacteria that is naturally occurring. So you end up really with a better fish. So there's got to be an evolution in terms. But until that evolution is more prevalent, you're best off the last 1 or 2 days catch.
Got it. So that term, when you see that it's been frozen, that could mean more than one. It could mean it was mechanically frozen.
99% of the time it's been mechanically frozen, because there's a cost to putting it under nitrogen, because it's a more expensive natural way of preservation.
Right. So if they're doing that, they're going to advertise that they're doing that.
Yes.
And can you tell, just looking at the fish at the fish counter, if it has been previously frozen?
Pretty much, yeah.
What do you look for?
There is there's a dryness to the flesh. There's not a sheen to it. Something that's very fresh has almost a glossy sheen. When you look at fish that's been previously frozen, it almost has a matted look to it.
And why do they thaw it out at all? You know what I mean? If it's been frozen, why not sell it to you frozen?
Because they have learned that fresh sells better than frozen.
Yeah.
It's more efficient for them. They have less waste, so they can take it out, theoretically let people know, well, it's kind of fresh, and they can control it a little bit better.
Yeah. And how do you know if you're getting the catch from the last 2 days of the trip versus the catch from the first day of the trip that was sitting around in the hold of the boat for a week?
The average person doesn't know.
Yeah.
If you're used to eating a lot of fish, or you're going to a particular fish market or restaurant that's known for their fish, then you know that the turnover rate is pretty quick.
Yep.
And your chances of getting that impeccably fresh fish, particularly if you've experienced in one of those settings, you will keep going back to it because you have trust in what they're doing.
Coming up, the Diner's Guide continues with Roger's blind taste test of farm-raised versus wild salmon, and his secret for making the perfect fish and chips. When I would go down to New Bedford to do interviews for the series, I would often stop by one of the fish markets in town on my way home just to see what was fresh, maybe get something for dinner. And it reminded me that a great fishmonger is really a special treat. And I'm not just talking about a fish seller, but somebody who can really make sure that you're only getting the best quality fish, tell you where it came from, maybe even offer you a tip on how to cook it. That is what you get from Rogers Fish Company. You can order online at rogersfishco.com or check out their new location at Logan Airport in Boston. Next term on our list, farm-raised versus wild. Mm-hmm. What should we know?
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. Farm-raised has a bad rep.
Yeah.
And maybe because early on as farming started to take off, there weren't the guardrails on that could really, whether it was in terms of feed, whether it was in terms of how the volume of the stock was in a particular pen or pond. And then there was disease that early on that caused some fish to die off, and so antibiotics were used in it. So, but that was early on. I mean, and so as the aquaculture industry has sort of evolved over time, there are people that do it poorly, and there are people that do it really well. And so obviously you want to migrate to the really well. Now, I'll give you a perfect scenario. So farm salmon was really one of the things, and I actually have to credit Julia because back in the 70s, she was a big proponent
of farm-raised salmon.
Of Norwegian salmon. Yeah, she really got behind it.
For sustainability purposes or for the flavor? Or?
I don't think we were talking sustainability at that point, but I think of just about availability. I mean, going back in like the 60s, there was still, believe it or not, some wild North Atlantic salmon.
Yeah,
it was few and far between, but it was really, the amounts were really way down, and so you then could only get product out of Alaska, which was being shipped a long way, and they weren't necessarily holding it well.
Yep. And for folks on the East Coast, farmed Norwegian salmon was a better option for her.
Yeah. And the other thing is, so you have farmed Norwegian salmon, you have Scottish salmon, you have Irish salmon, you have Faroe Island salmon, and they really started to perfect the feed and the growth cycles of them. And you got some pretty good fish. And then the flavor profiles, because it was a very consistent fat content to those. So little by little, it started making inroads on the wild salmon. And I would say 8 out of 10 people today in a panel, if you had farm versus wild and has people to take their choice, they would
a blind taste test.
Blind tasting, they would migrate at least 80 to 90% on the farmed. Now, I'll give
because it's fattier?
It is fattier, is more consistent. So I'll give you I'll show you how far it's evolved. There is salmon now coming out of New Zealand, the south tip of the South Island. They are raising salmon there on algae. They are not using other wild fish to feed the farm fish. They're feeding it algae. So the omega-3 content is off the charts. They have taken the Alaskan king salmon, which is different than the East Coast North Atlantic salmon because of the fat content that it naturally acquires. And they're growing that, and that fish is just off the charts. It's some of the best fish I've ever eaten. Yeah. And I think others will find that.
It's interesting because on menus, I feel like all these words carry an overtone. Like you advertise wild caught, just like you advertise never frozen. Those things are implicitly good. Farm raised, frozen, implicitly bad. But actually, you're saying one is not inherently better than the other.
Right.
You can have excellent farm raised. You can have very poor farm raised. You can have excellent wild caught. So those terms on their own do not tell you everything you need to know.
Exactly. And see, I think the difference is because when you look at meats, they have, different, whether it's choice or whether it's prime or whatever, you don't have that in fish. So people just sort of take fish as a whole and generalize at that point without appreciating the fact that it has many nuances.
Next, local versus imported. How do you think about that when you're buying fish?
I don't look at it as a commodity. I don't look at fish as a commodity. I look at it as a specialty item. And if someone in some country is doing a better job with certain species, you have to look at them. I mean, that's how I look at salmon.
Yeah, there's another one of those things where I just have this knee-jerk instinct when I go to a fish market that, if I see the haddock is from Iceland, there's part of me is like, I'd rather find the fish that was landed here.
Yes.
But I don't know if that's just a sentimental thing or that if fish is actually fresher, if it's actually higher quality, or if it's actually more sustainable even.
So again, it's very nuanced. But to your point, when you see that, I think going back 20 years ago, if you saw Icelandic cod or haddock, you'd think, it's imported. It's not going to be as good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the knee jerk on it. The reality is, a lot of the haddock and cod, they believe, have actually from New England have migrated over. So it's kind of like the same species.
Yeah.
Now, what I will say about Iceland, it is probably the most sophisticated country in the world for fish handling. I mean, they know how to handle fish.
Like the shoreside processing of it. Yeah.
Yes. And they have a lot of the species. So they have, at this point, the waters are cold enough that they have a lot of the species, and it's certainly more abundant than what we have now in New England.
Are you of the view that as our oceans continue to warm, that the cod may just not be a fish that we can catch here in large numbers anymore?
Yeah, I mean,
they're never coming back?
I am concerned about it, certainly. I think that there might be opportunities. They haven't perfected it yet. They've done it with some species, but I think at a certain point, you could farm those fish. And I think that would be one way of bringing it back.
Why don't we have farmed cod?
Well, it's funny. I do remember someone trying to farm cod. It almost worked. You would expect as you were farming the fish for it to get larger and larger.
Yeah.
And this particular farm, which ended up closing down, the cod stayed maybe 9 inches or 10 inches, but the belly got really big.
Interesting.
and
because of the diet.
It was the
Or
diet.
the enclosed area.
It was sort of done in sort of pens, and it was a great idea. They just hadn't perfected it at that point. So I suspect, American ingenuity being what it is, I think, and the fact that we have so much shoreline, I think that someone will crack the code on the species.
Yeah. So the last item on my glossary, and maybe the thorniest, which we've touched on already, is sustainability or sustainable.
Yes.
There's all these color gradings, rating systems, labels that we see around seafood. Maybe just start with the term itself. What does it mean to say a fish is sustainable?
It means that it's going to be there as long as we manage the stock appropriately. And it means also, we touched on a little bit, where a lot of farm fish were fed wild fish. Well, that really isn't sustainable. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul at that point.
Right.
So with new innovations such as algae, as an example, it becomes a little bit easier to do. But I think, again, I keep hearkening back to the Asian diet, where it's smaller portions in balance is a healthier diet. And I think going back, I remember years ago when we were, just had the fish market and in our early restaurant, it was like 12 to 16 ounces of fish on a plate.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think, it's like a giant, giant steakhouse. It's just like we eat differently, and we thought that was better, but it's not. If you're eating 4 or 5 ounces of fish at a time in proportion to carbs and vegetables and whatnot, that's really a healthier diet. So I think we can be more sustainable if we change how we eat and how we look at fish.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing in working on this series, I focus a lot on the fishermen and the regulators and trying to, kind of untangle that knot of, how we arrive at a sustainable fishery. But I think it's easy to forget that the other really important player in the equation is the consumer. And ultimately, if what we want is a big honkin' fillet of cod and salmon, and that's all we want, then that's what the industry is going to try and serve.
Yeah, but that's when it's really not sustainable, because that big piece of haddock cod is going to be so phenomenally expensive that it's only going to be affordable by a certain percentage of the population. Yeah. So I think people are going to continue to want fish because of the health benefits and how it makes them feel and the minerality of it. I think that we are sort of entering a period where we're adjusting portion sizes in a way that's healthier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how all these fish have gone through cycles. Like there were times decades ago when the haddock was really, really scarce, and then when the haddock was abundant, there were times when the yellowtail flounder was really scarce. So, I mean, on one level, it's a lot to ask of a consumer to, track the NOAA survey and stock assessments for all these fish. But it is sort of between the industry, the consumer, the fisherman. Ideally, there is some kind of circuit of communication about, what we should be eating more of and what we should be laying off of a given time.
We need more Julia Childs.
Yeah.
She could push us in a good direction.
What is the secret of perfectly fried fish and chips that you learned at age 10?
So it is about, well, obviously the quality of the product has to be there, but it's about the batter. And you want to coat the fish, and I'm going to give away a secret here, a little bit of buttermilk.
All right.
And then I like a dry batter. I don't like...
So it's not like pancake batter. We're talking like buttermilk and then
a dried flour batter that you put together. And so it doesn't puff up. There are a lot of, sort of... these.
You can name names. It's okay.
No. Well, so rather than taking a sort of a piece of fish and putting it in a beer batter where it blows up.
I know what you're talking about. It's like balloons out, and like you bite into it, and there's half an inch.
Right, exactly. And the batter tastes perfectly fine, and you get a little piece of fish it's okay. I like it just a thin coating of breading on it. Because I want to taste the fish.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Roger, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Ian. My pleasure.